The moment that changed everything happened at 8:47 p.m. when Eleanor Whitfield leaned across her daughter's shoulder at the head table, cupped her hand around her mouth, and whispered 4 words that her daughter, CEO of Whitfield Ventures, had not been prepared to hear. She said, "I know who he is." Claire Whitfield turned from the conversation she'd been having with her VP of Finance and looked at her mother. Eleanor was 71 years old, sharp as anyone Claire had ever known, with a specific kind of memory that aged into something almost supernatural, the kind that forgot where she'd put her reading glasses, but never forgot a face, never forgot a name, never forgot the story that went with either. Eleanor was looking across the room at the man who had been serving the head table all evening. He was tall, mid-30s, with the kind of quiet efficiency that good waitstaff had, present when needed, invisible when not, moving through the room with a specific economy of motion that Claire had noticed earlier in the evening without registering it as anything beyond competence. He was pouring water for a guest at the far end of the table now, and he had not looked up. "What do you mean?" Claire said quietly. "I mean I know who he is," Eleanor said, "and I need you to find out why he's serving dinner at your party." Claire looked at the man across the room. He still hadn't looked up. She had hired the catering company 2 months ago for this evening, the annual Whitfield Ventures investor dinner, the dinner that set the tone for the following year's relationships with the 60 people in this room who collectively represented $4 billion in committed capital. She had not personally interviewed the waitstaff. That was not how it worked. She looked at her mother. "Who is he?" she said. Eleanor looked at her with the expression she used when she was going to say something she expected to land significantly. "He's the man who saved your brother's life," she said. To understand what Eleanor meant, you had to go back 11 years. Claire had been 26, her brother Daniel had been 23, and he had been in the wrong place at the wrong time in a way that could have gone very differently than it did. He'd been a student then, home for winter break, and he had been in a convenience store in Denver at 11 p.m. when 2 men had come in with guns, and what had happened in the next 4 minutes had involved a former soldier who happened to be behind him in line, and who had, through a combination of training and decisive action, and the specific kind of courage that does not announce itself beforehand, had kept the situation from becoming something that Claire still could not fully bring herself to name directly, even 11 years later. Daniel had walked out. The former soldier had not immediately. He had been shot in the process of keeping the situation from becoming worse, and he had spent 11 days in Denver General Hospital, and their mother had gone to see him 3 times during those 11 days and brought things, food, books, the kind of company that said, "We are not going to let you be alone in this," because Eleanor Whitfield was the kind of woman who believed that some debts were sacred and permanent and did not expire because time had passed. The former soldier's name was Ryan Cole. He had been 24 years old at the time, recently separated from the Army, working a construction job and taking community college courses at night with the focused, deliberate purpose of someone who had a plan for his life and was executing it without fanfare. He healed. He recovered. He had, in the way of certain people who did remarkable things and then went back to living their regular lives without dwelling on the remarkability, moved on. Their mother had stayed in touch for about 2 years, Christmas cards, occasional calls, and then the contact tapered the way contact sometimes tapered when lives moved in different directions, and Ryan Cole became someone Eleanor talked about occasionally and thought about always and had not seen in 9 years. Until tonight. Claire excused herself from the head table at 9 o'clock. She did it smoothly, the way she did most things, without creating the kind of absence that required explanation, simply moving from one place to another as if the movement were simply the next thing in a natural sequence. She found the catering manager, a woman named Patricia who had been coordinating events for the Whitfield family for 7 years, near the kitchen service entrance. "The tall man serving the head table," Claire said quietly. "Who is he?" Patricia looked at her with the slight concern of someone trying to assess whether a problem was developing. "That's Ryan Cole. He's been with us for about a year. Very reliable. Is there an issue?" "No issue," Claire said. "I'd like to speak to him at some point in the evening, discreetly." "I'll let him know," Patricia said. Claire went back to the room. She watched him from a different angle now, with different eyes. He was moving between tables with the same quiet efficiency she had noticed earlier in the evening, and there was something in how he moved that she should have recognized immediately and hadn't. The specific, trained economy of someone who had spent years in environments where efficiency wasn't a preference, but a requirement, where economy of motion was the difference between outcomes. She watched him do his job. She watched him be invisible in the specific way that very capable people were invisible, the invisibility of someone who wasn't trying to be seen. She thought about 11 years, about a convenience store at 11 p.m., about Daniel, who was now 34 and ran a nonprofit in Denver and called her mother every Sunday without fail, and who, in the way of people who had been close to something terrible and survived it, built a life that was deliberately and gratefully full. She thought about Ryan Cole, 24 years old, who walked into a convenience store behind her brother and walked out of a hospital 11 days later and gone back to being a person that most of the world would never know anything about. And she thought about why he was serving dinner at her investor party 11 years later instead of doing whatever the plan he'd been executing had produced. He came to her at 9:45, at the edge of the room near the bar alcove, in the brief window between the main course and dessert service when his role gave him a natural pause. He had the look of someone who had been told the host wanted a word and had not known exactly what to prepare for. He stood with the careful, contained posture of someone in a service role talking to a client, which was appropriate and which also made her feel the need to immediately change the register of the conversation. "I want to tell you who I am before we talk," she said. "My name is Claire Whitfield. My brother is Daniel Whitfield." She watched his face. He went very still. Not the stillness of not understanding, the stillness of someone who understood completely and was taking a moment to integrate it before responding. "Daniel's sister," he said. "Yes." He looked at her for a moment. Something moved through his expression, not the pride or the expectation that she'd sometimes seen in people who had done something significant and knew they were being recognized for it. Something quieter. The expression of someone for whom the event she was referencing lived in a very specific and private place, and who was deciding what to do with having it brought into this room. "How is he?" Ryan said, simply, as if the most important available information was how Daniel was. "He's well," Claire said. "He runs a nonprofit in Denver. He has a wife and 2 kids. He calls her mother every Sunday." She paused. "He talks about you sometimes. He has for 11 years. Ryan was quiet. "My mother is here tonight," Claire said. "She recognized you across the room. She's going to want to come say something to you before the evening is over, and I wanted to tell you first so it wasn't," she paused, finding the word, "sudden." "Mrs. Whitfield is here," he said. "Yes." His expression did the thing again, the quiet, private movement that was not quite an emotion, but was its own kind of true. "She used to bring food to the hospital room," he said. "Every other day, she'd stay for an hour and talk about books she'd been reading. He stopped. "I didn't know how to thank her for that." "She didn't do it for thanks," Claire said. "She did it because she believed some things were owed and non-negotiable." He looked across the room to where Eleanor was still at the head table, talking to the guest beside her. "She looks the same," he said. "A little older, the same." "She's 71, Claire said, "and sharper than anyone in this room, including me." Something in his expression shifted, the ghost of something that might have become a smile. Then it settled back. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, returning to the register of the evening, the service register, the appropriate professional distance of someone who was aware of the context. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "I should get back to—" "I have a question first," she said. "My mother asked me why you're serving a dinner party 11 years after you were released from Denver General Hospital. She wasn't asking it critically, she was asking it the way she asks things she actually wants to understand. I'm asking it the same way." He looked at her for a moment with the direct, considering look of someone deciding how much of a true thing to say to a person they'd just met. "Plans change," he said. "What plan changed?" "The one that was running in 2014. I was 2 semesters in a business program. I had a job. He paused. "Things were working the way they were supposed to work." He looked at the middle distance for a moment. "My wife died in 2016. She was 28 years old. There was a tumor that was found too late, and then there was a year of treatment, and then there was her not being there anymore." He said it with the specific, careful directness of someone who had said this many times and had found the version of it that was accurate without being more than the situation required. Claire was quiet. Her name is Lily, he said. She's 8 now. She's the reason most things work the way they work. Is she... Claire stopped, then continued. Is she with someone tonight? My neighbor watches her when I work evenings, he said. Mrs. Park. She's been doing it for 4 years. She treats Lily like a granddaughter, and Lily treats her like one. What does Lily want to be? Claire asked. She wasn't sure why she asked it. It came out before the professional register could manage it back. He looked at her with an expression that was not quite surprised, but was something adjacent. Last week she was an oceanographer. This week she's interested in architecture. The week before that she was certain it was going to be running a restaurant, which lasted until she calculated what line cooks make and revised her opinion. She calculated what line cooks make, Claire said. She's 8, but she has very specific ideas about financial viability. Claire looked at him. Ryan, she said, dropping the formal register completely and watching him register the drop. I run a venture capital firm. I've been running it for 8 years. I've funded 43 companies. I have 60 limited partners in that room behind us, and I can identify talent in approximately 30 seconds of paying attention to how a person moves through a room. He waited. I've been watching you
for 3 hours, she said. The way you manage a room, the way you anticipate what a table needs before anyone at it signals, the way you handled the spill at table 6 without drawing attention from anyone beyond table 6, which required 4 separate decisions in about 7 seconds. She paused. What do you actually do? I wait tables, he said, and I take on contract operations work when I can find it, logistics consulting, small scale. I had a client base that grew to the point where the catering was supposed to be transitional, but the transitional part extended longer than I planned because Lily needed some things that required more predictable hours than the consulting produced. What kind of operations consulting? Supply chain efficiency, he said, primarily distribution. I worked with 3 mid-size food and beverage companies in the last 2 years on last-mile logistics problems. I have a case study I put together for a potential client presentation that reduced a regional distributor's spoilage rate by 31% over 9 months. Claire looked at him. 31%, she said. The methodology was straightforward once the data was visible, he said. Nobody had mapped the full chain. They were managing pieces of it and missing the interactions between the pieces. How long did the mapping take? 3 weeks, he said. The implementation was 6 months. She looked at him for a moment. Ryan, she said. Yes. I have someone in that room who is about to lose a distribution contract because their current operations consultant has been giving them visibility into pieces and missing the interactions, she said. I have been telling them for 4 months that they need someone who can see the whole chain, and they have not found the right person. Miss Whitfield, he said carefully. Claire, she said. Claire, he said. I'm working an event. I know, she said, and I respect that, and you should finish it. But I want you to take my card, and I want you to call me on Monday, not as a courtesy, and not because of Daniel, and not because of what you did 11 years ago, because of 31% and 7-second decisions, and the fact that you described a supply chain problem with more clarity than the last 4 people I paid consulting fees to talk to me about it. She held out her card. He looked at it. He took it. He put it in his vest pocket with the specific carefulness of someone who understood what they were accepting and was not taking it casually. I'll finish the evening, he said. I know you will, she said. And I'll call Monday. I know that too, she said. Go. Dessert service starts in 4 minutes. He almost smiled, the edge of it. He went. Eleanor came to him at 10:15, during the dessert course, when he had a natural pause near the window alcove. Claire had told her where to find him and had given her the privacy of it. She had redirected her VP of Finance and had made sure the guests near the alcove had fresh drinks and no needs requiring attention, and then she had simply made sure no one was going to interrupt. Eleanor walked to the alcove with the direct purposefulness of a woman who had been waiting 11 years for this specific moment and was not going to spend any of it on preamble. Ryan turned when he heard her approach. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Eleanor and Ryan, 71 and 35. A woman who brought books and food to a hospital room for 11 days because her belief in human debt was total and non-negotiable. and a man who had never quite found the right way to account for what that had meant in the specific aftermath of the hardest 11 days of his young life. "Ryan," Eleanor said. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said. She looked at him the way she'd looked at him in the hospital, fully, without the social filters that most encounters required, just completely seeing him. "You look well," he said. "So do you." And then, because it was true and it seemed important to say, "You look the same across the room. I recognized you immediately." "Then you've been managing an interesting evening," she said. "A little bit," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. "I heard about your wife," she said. "I'm sorry. I heard a few years ago through a mutual connection in Denver. I wanted to reach out, and I wasn't sure—" She stopped. "I wasn't sure it was my place anymore." "It would have been your place," he said quietly. She reached out and put her hand briefly on his arm, not the gesture of condolence exactly, the gesture of someone who was simply making contact, who believed that presence was the primary language of caring.
"Tell me about your daughter," she said. He told her about Lily, about the oceanographer, architect, restaurant owner trajectory, about Mrs. Park and the Tuesday nights and the library card Lily had treated since age 5 as the most important document in her possession, about the way Lily looked at buildings when they walked past them, with the specific assessing attention of someone who was already, at 8, asking why things were built the way they were built. Eleanor listened. "She sounds like Daniel," she said. "At 8, that specific quality of paying attention." "Daniel," Ryan said, and the name had a particular sound in his mouth, not heavy, not complicated, just real. "Claire told me he's well." "He's wonderful," Eleanor said. "He built something wonderful. He would want me to tell you. He has wanted to reach out for years. He didn't know how. He didn't want to—" She paused, finding the right words. "He didn't want the reaching out to feel like a burden, like he was asking you to carry something." "Tell him it wouldn't be a burden," Ryan said. "I will," Eleanor said. "First thing tomorrow morning." She looked at him with the expression that was her particular gift, the expression of someone whose attention was a form of care in itself, who made you feel in the receiving of it that you were known and that being known was safe. "You did something remarkable that night," she said. "I know you know that. I also know that people like you, the kind of person who does what you did, are very rarely comfortable being told it. So I'm going to say it once, clearly, and then I'm going to stop." He was still, the way he was still when something was being said that required stillness. "What you did that night gave my son back to us," Eleanor said. "What you did that night gave me 30 more years of his Sunday phone calls and his children's birthdays and the specific, irreplaceable privilege of watching the person he became. And I have thought about you every single week for 11 years, not out of obligation, out of something I don't have a clean word for, something that felt like gratitude doesn't cover it. Love is too large a word for someone I barely knew, something in between." She held his gaze. "I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're well, and I'm glad your daughter has a father who—" She stopped, took a breath, finished cleanly. "I'm just glad." Ryan looked at her. He did not try to respond to this in kind, because there was no response to this in kind. There was only the receiving of it, which he did, completely, openly, without the deflection that pride sometimes required. "Thank you," she said, "for the books, for coming, for—" He stopped too. "I was very alone in that hospital, and then I wasn't." She nodded once, the nod of someone whose point has been fully made and received. She patted his arm. She went back to the table. He thought about the card in his vest pocket for the rest of the evening. He thought about it on the drive to pick up Lily from Mrs. Park's house, and while Mrs. Park gave him the debrief on the evening. Lily had eaten everything, had gone to bed without argument after being allowed to finish one chapter of the library book she was currently treating as urgent, and had said she had an idea for improving the flow of Mrs. Park's kitchen that she wanted to discuss in the morning. He carried Lily up to her room the way he'd carried her since she was small, which she still let him do on the nights she'd been asleep at Mrs. Park's, the specific privilege of a half-asleep child who had not yet decided she was too old for it. He tucked her in. He sat on the edge of her bed for a moment in the way that parents sat at the edge of their children's beds sometimes, not for any specific reason, just for the being there. He thought about 31%, about 7-second decisions, about a woman in an expensive blazer who had said, "I've been watching you for 3 hours," and meant it as information and not as flattery, which was the most useful way to be watched by someone worth being watched by. He thought about plans, about the one that had been running in 2014, 2 semesters in a business program, and about the specific materials life had handed him instead of the ones he'd been using, and about what he'd built with them, not what he'd planned, not what he'd lost, but the actual thing. Mrs. Park on Tuesday nights, and the library card and the architectural assessments of an 8-year-old who wanted to understand why things were built the way they were built. Lily stirred. "Daddy," she said, not fully awake. "Here," he said. "Did the party go okay?" "It went well," he said. "Did you meet anyone interesting?" He thought about Eleanor's hand on his arm. He thought about Claire Whitfield saying 31% with the expression of someone updating a calculation. He thought about a card in a vest pocket, and Monday. "Yes," he said. "Good," she said. "Interesting people are important." "Go back to sleep," he said. She went back to sleep. He went to the kitchen. He sat at the table. He took the card out of his pocket. Claire Whitfield, Whitfield Ventures. The number was her direct line, he could tell from the format, 1 digit different from the office number that was printed in smaller text below it. He thought about the conversation, about the specific quality of it, not the gratitude, not the family connection, but the part where she'd asked about 31% and listened to the answer with the focused attention of someone doing actual assessment, about the way she'd described the problem her investor had, someone giving them visibility into pieces and missing the interactions. He knew that problem. He had solved the version of it 3 times in 2 years. He thought about Lily and the restaurant plan and the financial viability calculation and the way she'd said it was important to understand why things were built the way they were built, which was the most fundamental question in both architecture and supply chain logistics, which Lily did not yet know were connected by the same underlying question about what held things up and what fell apart. He set the card on the table. He made tea. He drank half of it before he reached his decision, which was not actually a difficult decision once he'd let himself look at it directly. It was only difficult when he approached it from the angle of what it might mean, rather than from the angle of what it actually was, which was a professional opportunity being offered by a competent person for a legitimate reason, and which he was going to call on Monday and discuss seriously and see where it went. That was all it was. For now. He called on Monday. He called at 9:15, which was early enough to be serious and not so aggressive as to be excessive, and her assistant put him through in under 2 minutes, which was its own information about how she'd filed the conversation. "Ryan," she said, when she picked up. Not Mr. Cole, not formal, just his name, in the direct way she apparently said everything. "Claire," I said. "Good weekend?" Lily decided architecture is still in the lead. She spent Sunday drawing floor plans for the apartment, very specific opinions on the placement of load-bearing walls. She's correct that load-bearing walls are placement-specific. She also thinks our current kitchen layout is inefficient. She's probably not wrong. "Tell me about the food and beverage clients." He told her, not the version for people who needed the concepts explained, the full version, the methodology and the data and the specific interventions at specific points in the chain and why they'd worked. She asked questions, good ones, the kind that told her she understood the domain at a level that required him to think carefully about his answers. They talked for 1 hour and 20 minutes. At the end of it, she said, "I'd like you to come in Thursday. I want you to meet the investor I mentioned. His name is Robert Gaines. He has 3 regional distribution centers, and I think you'll see the problem in 10 minutes. "What makes you think that?" he said. "Because you saw the problem in the way I described it at the party in 30 seconds, and I told me what was causing it before I asked." She paused. "Thursday at 10. I'll have the data package sent to you before Wednesday, so you can look at it." "All right," he said. "Ryan," he said. "Yes. I want to be clear about something," she said, "because I'm the kind of person who says things clearly or doesn't say them. The Thursday meeting is Thursday. What I'm thinking about beyond Thursday is something else, and I'm not conflating the two, and I'm not asking you to. I just want to be clear that both exist so you're not confused about what kind of call this is." He sat in the silence of that for a moment. "Both exist," he said. "Both exist." "Okay," she said.
Okay, I'll see you Thursday. Thursday came. He wore a suit he had not worn since a client presentation the previous spring, which still fit correctly because he ran 3 mornings a week and had not stopped. Lily assessed him on the way out the door, with the specific architectural eye she applied to most things. "You look like someone important," she said. "I'm going to a meeting." "With the woman from the party?" He looked at his daughter. "Mrs. Park told me she said a woman at the party recognized you and that you were going to a meeting because of it." "Mrs. Park is very well informed," he said. "She is," she agreed. "Is it a good meeting or a complicated one?" He thought about Claire Whitfield saying both exist in the direct, careful way she said things that were true and deserved to be said clearly. "Both," he said. Lily looked at him with the 8-year-old assessment that had been her particular gift since she was 3, the assessment of a child who paid full attention and made accurate conclusions. "That's usually the best kind," she said. He kissed her forehead. He drove to Whitfield Ventures. The Whitfield Ventures office was on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Denver, with windows that faced west toward the mountains, and when he was shown into the conference room, he stood for a moment looking at the mountains, before he looked at anything else in the room, because the mountains were simply there, and they deserved a moment. Claire came in with Robert Gaines 3 minutes later. She introduced them with the economy of efficiency she applied to introductions: name, relevant context, clear purpose, immediate move to the work. He saw the problem in 7 minutes. He said so at 11 minutes with the specific directness that felt right in a room where the other people were also being direct. "Here," he said, pointing to the data she'd set him, "and here, and the interaction between these two creates this." He traced the path on the printout. "This is where your spoilage is coming from. It's not the cold chain. It's the handoff timing between the second and third leg, and it's creating a thermal gap that compounds over 48 hours. Robert Gaines looked at the printout.
He looked at Claire. He looked at Ryan. "How long to fix it?" he said. "Implementation?" Ryan said. 3 to 4 months if you have the software infrastructure, which, from what I can see, you do. The mapping takes 2 weeks. The testing takes 6 weeks. The rest is change management. What's the projected reduction? Conservative estimate 23% spoilage reduction, Ryan said. Optimistic end of the range, 35. Depends on how quickly the team adapts to the new handoff protocol. Robert looked at Claire again. "Where has this person been?" he said. "Serving dinner at my investor party?" Claire said, with the perfect dryness of someone who had been waiting to say this exact sentence. Robert looked at Ryan. Ryan thought about vest pockets and Monday calls and an 8-year-old who said that was usually the best kind, and a card that sat on a kitchen table while tea cooled. "I'm available," he said. 6 months later, Lily stood in the Whitfield Ventures lobby waiting for her father, who was finishing a meeting on the 14th floor. She was doing what she did in most spaces she found herself in, looking at the architecture with the assessing attention she brought to all things built, cataloging decisions and their effects, the way the lobby light came from 2 directions and created a shadow that was interesting in the mid-afternoon. Claire came down on the elevator, not because Ryan's meeting was finished, it wasn't yet, but because she'd seen Lily through the lobby camera that fed to her computer and made a decision that she executed directly, the way she executed most decisions. She walked to the lobby. She stood beside Lily. She looked at what Lily was looking at. "The skylights," Lily said, without turning. "They're angled 3 degrees differently from what you'd expect. Most people wouldn't notice." "What does it do?" Claire said. "It keeps the direct light off the reception desk so the screens stay readable all day, but it also means the afternoon shadow falls here instead of here," she pointed, "which makes this part of the lobby warmer by feel, even though the actual temperature is the same." Claire looked at the lobby with different eyes. "You're right," she said. Lily turned and looked at her for the first time. She had Ryan's directness and something of her own that was purely Lily, the specific, particular focus of a child who had arrived in the world paying full attention and had not stopped. "You're Claire," Lily said. "Yes," Claire said. "Your daddy says you're very good at your job," Lily said. "I try to be," Claire said. "He said you noticed things other people missed at the party." "He did too," Claire said. "That's why we work together now."
Lily thought about this. She looked back at the skylights. The 3-degree angle, she said. Was that intentional? According to the original architect, yes, it was the last change he made before the building was completed. He said he wanted the people who worked in the lobby to feel warm without knowing why. Lily was quiet for a moment. That's the best kind of design, when you can't see what's doing it, but you feel it anyway. Claire looked at this 8-year-old standing in her lobby, making observations about architecture and design and the invisible work of good decisions. She thought about Ryan across the room at the investor dinner, moving between tables with the quiet efficiency of someone doing an invisible job well. She thought about Eleanor's hand on his arm, and the 11 days in a hospital, and the plans that had changed, and the materials life had handed him instead. She thought about what Lily had just said, the best kind of design, when you can't see what's doing it, but you feel it anyway. She thought, yes, that's exactly right. The elevator opened. Ryan came through it and saw his daughter in the lobby, and the specific, invisible warmth of his face when he saw her was the same warmth it was every time, unmanaged and complete. He saw Claire standing with Lily. He looked at his daughter. "What have you been doing?" "Talking about skylights and design." "Of course," he said. He looked at Claire. The look that had developed over 6 months of Thursday meetings and 2 dinners that were not business dinners and 1 Saturday at the farmer's market that had included all 3 of them and Gerald, the neighbor's cat, who had somehow ended up there too. The look that was its own kind of architecture, visible in the way good design was visible, felt before it was seen. "Meeting went well," she said. "I know. I sent you the follow-up email 12 minutes ago. I sent it from my phone in the elevator." "I know," he said. Lily looked between them with the architectural assessment. "The 3-degree angle," she said. They both looked at her. "What?" Ryan said. "Nothing," Lily said. "I'm hungry. Can we get food?" "Yes," Ryan said. "Somewhere with good architecture," Lily said, already moving toward the door. Ryan held it. Claire went through. He followed. The lobby held the warmth it had always held, the specific, invisible warmth of a 3-degree angle that most people felt without knowing why. Some things worked that way. The best things, usually. If you've ever been invisible in a room that didn't know what it was looking at, this story is for you. The right person notices. Not always right away, not always in the way you expect, but the right person notices, and when they do, what they see is the whole of it. The evening job, and the 8-year-old, and the 31%, and the card in the vest pocket, and all of it. Drop a comment and tell us about a time someone finally saw what you were actually capable of. We read every single one. Subscribe for more stories like this every week. We'll see you next time.